In the golden age of Hollywood, when studio executives held the power to reshape entire narratives with a single phone call, one woman stood her ground against an entire system. Sophia Loren, the Italian goddess who captivated the world, made a demand so bold, so unprecedented, that it would forever change how we understand the relationship between star and story. This is the untold tale of artistic courage, creative vision, and one perfect final beat that almost never was. Little did the world know, the ending we remember today exists only because of one woman's unshakable conviction. In 1960, Hollywood was a kingdom ruled by men in suits, where leading ladies were expected to smile, deliver their lines, and trust that others knew what was best for their careers. But Sophia Loren was never just another leading lady. Born Sophia Villani Ciccoloni in the poverty-stricken outskirts of Naples, she had clawed her way from selling furniture in her mother's shop to becoming the most desired woman in cinema. Every role she took was a calculated step towards something greater artistic. Legitimacy. The film in question was Two Women, Vittorio De Sica's harrowing tale of survival during World War II. Loren wasn't just starring in it. She was co-producing it, investing her own money and reputation into a project that studios deemed too dark, too foreign, too real for American audiences. The story followed Cicera, a mother fleeing war-torn Rome with her teenage daughter, only to face unthinkable horrors that would test the very limits of human endurance. When Loren first read the script, she knew this was her, Citizen Kane, the role that would define her legacy. But as production neared completion, the studio executives began to circle like vultures, demanding changes that would sanitize the story's brutal honesty. They wanted a Hollywood ending, something palatable, something that wouldn't leave audiences feeling devastated in their seats. What they didn't anticipate was that Sophia Loren had already made up her mind about how this story would end, and she was prepared to fight for every frame. Cesare Zavattini's screenplay was a masterpiece of neorealism, raw, unflinching, and emotionally devastating. Based on Alberto Moravia's novel, it painted World War II not through the lens of heroic soldiers or grand battles, but through the eyes of ordinary women caught in extraordinary circumstances. Every scene was crafted with surgical precision, building toward a climax that would leave audiences questioning everything they thought they knew about survival, dignity, and the cost of living through hell. The original ending, as written, was a quiet masterpiece of restraint. After enduring unspeakable trauma, mother and daughter would board a train back to Rome, forever changed, but somehow still whole. The final shot was to be a slow pullback as their train disappeared into the Italian countryside, a metaphor for healing, for moving forward, for the resilience of the human spirit. It was subtle, it was profound, and it was everything Hollywood executives feared. Studio notes began flooding in like a paper storm. Too ambiguous. Needs more resolution. American audiences won't understand. They wanted speeches about hope. They wanted tears of joy. They wanted the trauma explained and packaged into neat emotional boxes that could be easily digested. Some executives even suggested adding a romantic subplot for the daughter, anything to soften the devastating reality of what these women had endured. But Loren read between the lines of every suggested change. They weren't trying to improve the story. They were trying to destroy its soul. The ending, that perfect final beat, wasn't just a conclusion. It was the entire point of everything that came before it. And she would be damned if she'd let them take it away. The confrontation came on a rain-soaked Tuesday in November 1960, in a conference room overlooking the Paramount lot. Sophia Loren sat across from 6 studio executives, her hands folded calmly in her lap, her dark eyes betraying none of the fire burning within. She had prepared for this moment like a general preparing for battle, knowing that everything she had worked for hung in the balance. "Miss Loren," the head of distribution began, his voice carrying the practiced condescension of a man who had crushed 1,000 artistic dreams. We need to discuss some concerns about the ending. Our focus groups. Stop. The word cut through the room like a blade. Loren's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. I don't care about your focus groups. I don't care about your concerns. This ending stays exactly as written. The room fell silent. In an era where even established male directors rarely challenged studio authority so directly, an actress, even one as successful as Loren, simply didn't speak this way. The executives exchanged glances, uncertain how to respond to such unprecedented defiance. Sophia, another executive, tried, his tone patronizing. You have to understand. American audiences will understand perfectly. She interrupted again. They'll understand because they're human beings, not the children you think they are. This story deserves an ending that honors what these women went through. Not some Hollywood fairy tale that makes everyone feel better about themselves. The tension in the room was palpable. Contracts could be torn up. Careers could be ended with a single phone call. But Sophia Loren sat perfectly still, a queen defending her kingdom, waiting to see who would blink first. What the executives didn't know, what nobody in that room could have understood, was that for Sophia Loren, this wasn't just about a movie. This was about her own mother, Romilda Villani, who had lived through the war with 2 young daughters, making impossible choices to keep her family alive. This was about her own childhood, spent hiding in tunnels during Allied bombing raids, watching her beautiful mother trade dignity for bread, for safety, for another day of survival. Every scene in 2 Women was a memory made manifest. When Shasira clutched her daughter Rosetta in the bombed-out church, Loren was channeling her mother's fierce protection. When they faced the brutal reality of what war did to innocent people, she was honoring every woman who had ever sacrificed pieces of her soul to protect what mattered most. The ending they wanted to change wasn't just a cinematic choice, it was the truth of survival. That quiet moment on the train, that subtle acknowledgement that some wounds never fully heal, but life must continue anyway, was everything her mother had taught her about resilience. To change it would be to betray not just the story, but the memory of every woman who had ever endured the UNENDU RABLE. In the days following that confrontation, Loren barely slept. She walked the streets of Rome at night, past the same buildings that had been bombed during her childhood, remembering the taste of fear, the sound of her mother's voice, whispering reassurances that everything would be all right. She knew that if she compromised now, if she allowed them to sanitize this story for the sake of box office receipts, she would never forgive herself. The phone calls came daily, agents, producers, well-meaning friends, all urging her to be reasonable. But Sophia Loren had never been reasonable. Reasonable women didn't claw their way out of poverty to become international stars. Reasonable women didn't invest their own money in foreign films that challenged American sensibilities. And reasonable women certainly didn't tell studio executives exactly where they could shove their focus group data. Vittorio De Sica found himself caught in an impossible position. The legendary director had already won international acclaim with films like Bicycle, Thieves, and Umberto D. But American distribution remained the holy grail that could secure his artistic legacy forever. He believed deeply in the story they had crafted together, but he also understood the brutal mathematics of the film industry. Late one evening, De Sica and Loren met at a small cafe near the Trevi Fountain, away from the prying eyes of studio representatives and industry spies. The director's weathered hands shook slightly as he lit his cigarette, the weight of the decision evident in every line of his face. "Sophia," he said quietly, "they're threatening to pull distribution entirely. Without American theaters, this film dies in darkness. All our work, all your investment gone." Loren stirred her espresso slowly, watching the dark liquid swirl like a prophecy. "Vittorio, Do you remember why we made this film? It wasn't for the money. It wasn't for the awards. It was because this story needed to be told, exactly as it happened. If we compromise now, what's left? But if no one sees it, they will see it. Her voice carried a certainty that seemed to come from somewhere beyond logic. Maybe not immediately. Maybe not in the way we planned. But truth has a way of finding its audience. Great endings don't need focus groups, Vittorio. They need courage. The director studied her face in the flickering candlelight, seeing not just the international star, but the young girl who had survived the war, who had watched her world burn and rebuild itself from ashes. In that moment, he made his choice. Whatever happened, they would protect the ending. Word of Loren's ultimatum spread through Hollywood like wildfire. In an industry built on compromise and careful political maneuvering, her absolute refusal to bend created shockwaves that reached from studio boardrooms to agents' offices. Some called her brave. Others called her career suicide. But everyone was watching to see what would happen next. The studio's response was swift and brutal. They began leaking stories to the trades about difficult foreign stars and uncommercial artistic pretensions. They suggested that American audiences were,